Happy Friday and Matthery Day. This is one of my very favorite mathematicians. I know I've probably said that every time, but I really mean it this time. This is Ada Lovelace, and I just think the world of her. Again, another hero. I think she's fantastic. So she was born in 1815 and died in 1852, actually from cancer. That's a bummer. She didn't live very long, only 41 years. It's not a lot to live. But anyway, she did some awesome stuff while she was here. She was English, so she's from England, mathematician and writer, chiefly known for her work with Charles Babbage on his proposed mechanical general-purpose computer, the analytic engine. She was the first to recognize that the machine had applications beyond pure calculation and published the first algorithm intended to be carried out by such a machine. As a result, she is sometimes regarded as the first to recognize the full potential of a computing machine, and she's known as the first computer programmer. Now, just put this into perspective for a minute. Look, we're like Civil War time, and this is when the first computer programmers were working. Like, this is so much earlier. Like, the computers really started to happen. We're talking like World War II. We're talking like 1940s, 50s, and 60s when they really actually started to get going. That's a full 100 years after this. So she was really ahead of her time, which is awesome. She was the only legitimate child of the poet Lord Byron and his wife Anne Isabel. Her mom actually left her dad only just a few weeks after she was born. And a few months later, Lord Byron left England, and Lovelace never saw her father. I don't think she even ever met him, except for as a baby. And then he died in Greece when she was 8 years old, so she didn't really get to know her father. She was taught math from a very early age. She had an unusual upbringing for an aristocratic girl in the mid-1800s. At her mother's insistence, tutors taught her mathematics and science. Such challenging subjects were not standard fare for women at the time. We've talked about that before. But her mother believed that engaging in rigorous studies would prevent Lovelace from developing her father's moody and unpredictable temperament. So she thought that learning math and science would keep her from being emotional. Side note, it didn't work. Also, weirdly, aren't you glad you don't live in the 1800s for this? Lovelace was also forced to lie still for extended periods of time because her mother believed it would help her develop self-control. So, should I make you guys sit really still to learn self-control? Probably not. Okay. Let's see. So she was privately schooled in math and science by some pretty notable people, including Mary Somerville, who was, we might have to talk about her later on because she's pretty awesome. She's a noted researcher and scientific author of the 19th century. One of her later tutors was mathematician and logician Augustus de Morgan, who's actually a college professor. From 1832, when she was 17, that's actually when she met Charles Babbage, her mathematical abilities began to emerge, and her interest in mathematics dominated the majority of her adult life. In a letter to her mother, de Morgan suggested that her daughter's skills in mathematics could lead her to become an original mathematical investigator, perhaps of first-rate eminence. And again, remember, this was not a world that women were normally in. Right, so Lovelace often questioned basic assumptions by integrating poetry and science. Normally, we think of those as very separate things. While studying differential calculus, she wrote to De Morgan, "I may remark that the curious transformations many formula can undergo, the unsuspected, and to a beginner apparently impossible, identity of forms exceedingly dissimilar at first sight is, I think, one of the chief difficulties in the early part of mathematical studies. I am often reminded of certain sprites and fairies one reads of, who are at one's elbows in one shape now and in the next minute in a form most dissimilar." So she's actually comparing math formulas to sprites and fairies. I get a kick out of that. Lovelace believed that intuition and imagination were critical to effectively applying mathematical and scientific concepts. Do you feel that? I hope I'm bringing at least a little bit of that intuition and imagination into your math classes, because it really is true. She valued metaphysics as much as mathematics, viewing both as tools for exploring the unseen worlds around us. Okay, and like I said, she died from uterine cancer in London in 1852. And cool thing, she was buried next to her father in the graveyard of the Church of St. Mary Magdalene in Nottingham, England. So, again, Lord Byron's kind of famous in his own right, obviously. But this is my favorite part, guys. Okay, so she worked a lot with Charles Babbage. A lot of their work was letters, and they have all these letters. For like 20 years, they wrote letters back and forth to each other. And in one of those letters, Charles Babbage called her the Enchantress of Number. And I think that's like my favorite thing, and maybe I need to have that as a name. So I'm now going to be Mrs. Sanford, Enchantress of Number. All right, hope you enjoyed Ada Lovelace.